Welcome everybody to Wednesday's Live. Today we're going to go to the Musée d'Or and try to paint these wonderful gardens that they have there. It will also present a kind of a situation where, and it's something that happens a lot. We're used to hearing the idea that so-called warm colors advance and cool colors recede. But what do you do in the very common situation where the foreground is in shade and perhaps the background is illuminated, such as it is here? So how can you still make that work? Another issue here is we have a lot of texture. And if we're not careful, everything could kind of wind up in the same space. Hi, Lori. And flatten out. So how do we get a sense of distance? How do we make the texture work for us? What do we do when, typical with gardens, a lot of times the leaves and the foliage are the same relative size as the blossoms and the flowers themselves. So we're going to work with that. I'm going to start right in with the draw. Well, first I'll show you. Here's a little bit of a close-up of this area here. Lovely variety of roses. These French gardens, I was very impressed with the fact that they're large, but they don't feel overly formal. They make them feel rather kind of just natural and simple. And this was a very good example of that. But here's a bit of a clue. I made a black and white version of the image. So you can see we've got kind of a Z of the lights. And then we have this big pattern of the darks. And we can see that there's, in the shade, a little less texture than in the illuminated areas. So that helps us out there. That gives us a clue. But to go with the draw, it's going to be fairly simple. We're going to have the horizon line, which in this instance is going to be where the sky meets the land. It's very important that we keep this line very level, the most distant part, because we've got a diagonal line here along the shore, which is going to, we don't want to make it look like we're tipping the water out of the painting. Now I'm going to put in a couple of these trees. This one is fairly straight. And then it breaks into kind of a U shape. That's all I'm going to put in. I'm going to make the needles of that pine happen later. And this is just really and again, I'm going to put the bases of these two trees in different places. In other words, the bottom, where they hit the ground. They are pretty close together, but I'm going to make sure they hit the ground in different places. There is a bit of a slope in here, and then everything else is kind of coming back here. So I'm just working for position. And if it helps, we'll go with this. to show a little more of the beach as if I were further in there and taller, which I'm not. And down here we've got, hi Michael, where most of our, again, it's going to be, I think it's better to paint. So the first thing to think of when we're trying to sort this color out, how do I make the cool colors stay in the foreground and the warm colors stay in the back? One thing we can do is use the how intense or how saturated or how vibrant the foreground colors are versus the ones in the background. We can see that there's, yes, some blue back here, but it's a very gray blue. It's nothing like the blue here or the turquoise there. We have some blue greens here, some blue greens back there. These are going to be more vivid, those less vivid. Then we've also got the yellower greens, the lighter greens. Those could be delegated the same way. We could put more of an ochre yellow green in there and then transition to the brighter yellow, like the cad yellow or the more vivid Nicolazzo. So that'll help us out there. So in other words, the idea here is, since the so-called cool warm thing is reversed, we're going to rely on the intensity or the saturation or the vividness of the color to create the color space. Grayer in the background, more vivid in the foreground. Then we have the flowers, the blossoms themselves. We want to make sure that the ones in the front are a little bigger and the ones in the back are a little smaller. Just the obvious thing. Now, there's a way we can go about this. You can try to paint around them kind of hard, or you can kind of mask them out. I am going to use a couple of little strategies here. I'm going to tear up little bits of tape, irregular shapes of tape, and I'm going to place them such that they form oddball, crazy shapes, which means you'll have to overlap them. Don't clump them in some places, have some outliers that are in others. And in the end, one thing that's kind of effective that we can do is if we lose them or they're, you know, we can use this, get into our white gouache. I don't have any compunction about that. We don't want to lose the big shape because we're fiddling around trying to get the smaller shape. So I'm going to put that stuff down there, peel it up later, see what we get. Now, these are, of course, going to be this size. I want some that are a different size, so I'm going to use the China marker pencil. And hi, Judy. I think when I took this picture, you and Jim were back behind here. So, yeah, let's put those. Okay, some big ones. You won't be able to see this. I'm going to but when we put the wash over it, they'll show up. Because this is white on white. The other thing about these shapes with the tape you can always reduce their size. Later. The problem with this is that it's going to be white, and that's all it's going to be. So, because it's waxy and it's going to resist. So as long as they're in irregular shape, we can pass them off as a clumped kind of thing. And this is going to take a little bit of time. Now, maybe you can notice I'm going to make a Z like that. I'm going to try and lead the eye with these blossom shapes. Trying to clump them in an irregular fashion. Make sure I get them all pressed down. And I may just paint in what I need too. I'm going to put in a few more than perhaps was actually there. We want lots. After all, it's about the flowers. It's about a garden. Kind of funny to think in terms of black flowers and a white background. Okay, that's enough of that. So, what do we got? Hi, Susan. Now, what are we going to paint first? Pretty much the standard way of painting watercolors is light to dark, and we're definitely going to stick with that scheme. And top to bottom, we're going to go with lighter colors to darker colors, wetter, thin, more juicy washes, working towards the denser consistencies of paint. But for starters, we're going to do that sky. Now, this line of clouds is just kind of straight. I want to make it a little bit more an echo of what's going on, or perhaps maybe even like a more, what would you call it, a more billowing cloud. So I'm going to mix up a pale cobalt and cad red gray, violety gray. I might put a little bit of yellow ochre in it to take the vividness out. Reason I'm doing that, I don't want it to compete with the blue of that or the blue of this. So it's runny paint. It's pale paint. I think I'm going to have to go a little bit darker with that. It does need to show up. Okay. So what I'm painting is the side to base of the clouds. Hi, Diane. So the trees are darker. down to the area of the land there. Now straight away, I'm going to get into the regular cobalt and put in the blue of the sky, leaving some of the white and rinsing the brush. I'm leaving white for the whites of the clouds, rinsing that and taking it down and softening the lower portions here and maybe even touching in to where the grays are. So I get a soft edge there. Hello, Linda. I don't want that, so I might take some of this that I just mixed and do a sort of darker version of the gray of the clouds, and I may, because that's damp, because I previously applied paint, it's going to be a very soft edge. That's an example of the wet consistency into the wet consistency. So if the two consistencies are similar, they're going to merge and create a soft shape. That edge looks a little hard, but I don't think I have to worry about it too much because there's going to be some very hard shapes up there. While that, I want a relatively, let's just go right down to the distant land there. So I'm going to get a little bit of ultramarine. I have to start going darker now. This is still runny paint, but not as runny. And maybe even I'll get a little bit of this Holbein lavender because it's almost like a gray. And I'm going to, some of that will swim uphill into what we have just painted and create a very soft, furry edge. And by the way, the board is at a 45, nearly 45 degree angle. So coming out of that, I can put a little more ultramarine and a little bit of some, I guess you can't see it down here. I've got some raw sienna that I'm dipping into to make a greener, dull green to come up under that. If I get some little white skips somewhere, that won't be so bad. If it's too furry, I'll live with it. I'm going to make this a little bluer now. Perhaps a little, maybe that's too bright a green, we'll see. I want a bluish green. I'm going to come down to where we get into, right into the city of Granville or its suburbs. And now I'm going to have to go right to the raw sienna because I want that beach to be light golden tan. I'm going to let that set up. Nelia, hello. Mop this up. And now this gorgeous, gorgeous turquoise. This is where the pretty much, that's the English Channel, but not far from where it meets the Atlantic. We're on the west side of the Cherbourg Peninsula. A little bit of ultramarine with this. So I better make more. Maybe even a little cobalt. Some blue in the turquoise. If that seems too that's more like what I want. I'll leave a little bit of white, and hopefully that will appear to be waves breaking on the shore. And I make it a little darker and a little bluer as we get closer to over here. The greens will be darker, so if I get down to where I would like to rather have had a green, that's all right. So I'm putting a little more of that yellow in there, that nickel yellow, to get the greener, shallower water. And I'm going to let that dry. Later on I may touch in some slightly darker things there, but we'll see. Now, the situation with the are yellows. Some yellows and some more ochre yellows, then lime yellows, and then we're going to go to the greens. So let's have some yellow ochre with a little bit of that turquoise. I'll put a little raw cyan in it too. And then I'm going to make another puddle. I'll just, let's see, we'll just mop that up. With the brighter yellows. So cad yellows. And ochreish yellows. And then back here, Asya, how are you? So, what you probably won't be able to see is back in these two pockets, I'm going to mix some greens. Well, let's think about that. Going to do it a little bit different. Hi, Jerry. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on. It'll start to dry up, and then I'm going to spritz it, spray it with this, and then I'm going to work the blues into that. Just an idea I just had. It may work and it may not. We will see. So this up into here. I think I may leave that area for a beach. I'll tint that later. I think that's not going to be quite dark enough, so I'm going to put some yellow ochre in it while it's wet. Now you can see the little white dots are showing up. I'm going to try and keep a bead there. Now I'm going to switch to my brighter yellows. Try and keep a bead going. A little bit of that in there, isn't there? If I get any little spots left over, gee, I could make those into flowers as well. So you can see I'm very much running out of paint here. So try to keep a bead here. Now, the greens. I'm going to have duller greens back here and the bluer greens with turquoise, more vivid colors. So let's just start mixing them. Okay, yellow ochre. And perhaps a little bit of turquoise. Now there are going to be darker greens on top of this. More turquoise. Well, no, let's make it cobalt. Like consistency into light consistency, so runny into runny, so it's going to appear with a very soft edge. Leaving a bit of the yellow behind, hopefully in an irregular way. Hi, Lisa. Now we're going to get into a colder kind of green. I am at this point mixing what will be the lighter portions of the green in this area. So some turquoise and some cobalt. This is slower moving. Because this is going to indicate the areas in shade, we hope, if I'm lucky. Let's get a little more of that mixed up. Cerulean and turquoise. Let's give it a spray to keep it lubricated. Hi, Brent. Maybe a little more turquoise and a little more cerulean there. Debating whether to leave some of those light spots. Nope, anything that's in shade will not be that light. So now I can start refining this shape a bit. like consistency into like consistency here. You can't hear this, but I've got hummingbirds outside my window here. That's a good sign, I think. Now, stiffer mixes of paint, so stiffer brush. Hi, Becky. So this is what I've been using, squirrel. Now I'm going to switch to the probably sheep or goat hair oriental brush. We're going to get into our darker, this is Prussian blue. And some of the cad yellow, more Prussian, lots more Prussian. And then over here, Prussian, cobalt or ultramarine, either one, and a little bit of permanent alizarin. Up here is probably a little drier than I want. Well, big part of watercolor, Anthony makes a point here, a big part of it is seeing through to the colors. That's probably not going to be dark enough. So I'm putting a little more alizarin in it. Bit of that in there. I'm squinting. I'm looking for this pattern. So maybe I'll keep that up. We will be putting in those trunks of those pines a little bit later. A little more of the red in it, the permanent alizarin, because it's sort of purple. Could even try and help ourselves out here. Just make sure you don't point that direction, because we don't want too many birds at this point. This will give us the smaller marks that are further away. And they may not be the last ones either. Could also get a smaller brush. There's nothing that says. Now, I'm going to get into these colder greens, which is maybe a combination of the turquoise and the Prussian. Again, help myself out. These give me an irregular mark, which I can sort of capitalize on and create a mark with some texture. Uh-oh, my little flowers there. Get out to the end of the brush. Hi, Diane. Hi, Shelley. And so I can get a more crazy mark. This does not look irregular enough to me. Push against the point. Z. We're going to need more of both of those components. Boy, I should have put more Prussian out. John, you'll be sorry. Now this cool green here, this turquoisey green, I'm going to use for, I'm going to try to shape some of those, to use them for leaves. I can also lift through this to get a similar effect. I might also pull a few of these up like that to suggest this, whatever that spiky plant was. I'm not much of a horticulturist, so I don't know what I'm looking at most of the time. Need to be a little wetter there. Heck, I'm just going to get even into some of the purple here, because I'm running out of Prussian blue, so I get into my dioxazine purple. And this is where the really deep shade is. So let's go back to what we're... More turquoise. Squinting, squinting, looking for that big pattern. So this is a very vivid color. I hope you can, that is coming across in the monitors or the devices or whatever. It's a more vivid dark than that, although we might tuck a little bit of it in here and there. Let's get some of the redder stuff, use it for that. Now, I think I'm dry enough here that I can... Oh, I got a bird. Well, we'll make it a bird. What the heck? So here comes my trunks. We're going to make more of that later. Well, I'm going to let that one disappear into the foliage so that it appears to be behind this one. So do a little smearing. Hi, Catherine. Now I'm going to try to, as I did earlier, begin suggesting some leaves. If any of these shapes that I'm creating in here look geometric or inorganic, then I'm going to want to break them up so that they don't have that appearance. Could even create some of the spiky plant. Should go this way. It's a little bit wet. We'll have to wait for that one. Get the can pick out the odd. I don't want to get too carried away with that. I want the redder, more purplish mix in here. And I'm anxious to create a strong contrast behind some of my bright flowers there. Squinting, looking for that large dark pattern. Getting a lot of birds. That can be kind of gimmicky, the splattering, but it works well. Now, at this point, we need to dry this thing. So I am going to mute. And we're back. Okay, now let's go back to our color example. I want to make a little more variation in these yellow greens. So that's going to involve some slight glazing. So let's mop out well, there we get a green, don't we? I'm not being lazy, it's just that I'm using colors that they will harmonize with one another. So as I come forward, I'm progressively leaving little bits of the previous green behind. And usually this transitional green will occur where, so here I'm making up a rather dark one. This will occur either where it's going over the lighter areas, such as the beach. Oops. There we go. Or where it transitions from the light area into the shade area. And we could still be adding some of these as we go. Because when I'm done with this, what I want to do is peel up the tape and have a look at where our flowers are going to be. At this point, I'm just sort of finessing the texture from one shade area to another. All right, so let's start peeling up our tape and seeing what we get as far as blossoms. And with luck, it will look like a garden that has primarily white flowers, but we're going to put some pinks and reds in, and some lavenders. This could take a couple of minutes. And I'll want to examine these white shapes and make sure that I haven't got something that looks too inorganic. The roses over there, it's like roses just seem to go crazy in that area of France. Everywhere you go, there's beautiful roses. And it seems whatever their growing zone is in that part of the world, it's just many kinds of plants seem to love it. Okay, now I think I've got them all. Right, now first thing I'm going to do is address that little bit of beach back there with some Naples yellow or yellow ochre, or maybe even a little bit of burnt sienna. Leave a bit of white for crashing surf. All right, now let's get some, well, going to get like this lavender color, and I'm going to tint these flowers in shade. So they could be white flowers, but they're in shade so they don't look quite white. Now, these red blossoms, I'm going to get that rather questionable permanence of this it's a color called Opera Rose. And it may not be the most light fast. A little bit of that in there too. Since this is a very vivid color, I'm going to try and confine this. Let's make it a little bit more orangey red as well in some of them. Put one or two, yeah, let's see. And then I'm going to go back, and I want these to be white and smaller. So that means to make them look smaller, I'm going to have to kind of reduce their scale a bit by bringing in some green around them. And that'll also frame them too. So a darker green, let's get a Prussian. Some of that nice stuff there. Holding the brush at the end. Oh, thank you, Becky. Yeah, this would have been a wonderful place to set an easel up and paint. Sadly, there was plenty of space to set up an easel, but the tours of the facility are timed. So you weren't able to probably hang around as long as you might want to make a painting. Or I would want to hang around to make a painting. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to get up there and we might finesse this down here too. Let's get into our Prussian for a deep, oh gosh, I'm going to have to probably get into the dioxazine purple. Create that Z. Some dark areas down here. A little dry brush to get some texture. This is slow moving paint. Doesn't move very fast at all. And it begins with a dark component, so that helps too. orchestrating the path of the eye. Where we're making the viewer look. And we're going to cluster those dark shapes within those dark shapes, just like we did with the flower. We don't want to distribute them like pepperoni on a pizza. Larger shapes, smaller shapes, irregularly distributed. Maybe leave some of the previous color in the shape of a leaf to indicate deep shade there. Now, where I see some deep shade places in there. Now our foliage. I'm going to bring the image down a little further to facilitate that. So the bottom portion is not going to be real visible to you. So I want a stiffer brush, like the one I've been using, and I want deep olive greens. So I'm going to mix Prussian or indigo, or maybe even this purple, which I guess I'm going to have to use that because I'm running out, and a little bit of raw umber, which this will be my darks. For the lighter portions of that, I'm going to mix more or less the same mix. And this azo yellow. It's a more olive green, a little bit of raw umber in it. So I'm looking for the clump, that shape. It's roughly a triangle with some holes in it and a thing. So let's get the, well, that's going to need to be dark. Dark, dark, dark. Pushing, giving it an irregular shape. Pressing on it like so. This is the may seem cruel to the brush, but now block that, and I'm getting into the other stuff, which is, well, let's doggone it. A little more brilliant green. Putting it right on top, and it's going to get some soft, because it's a similar consistency into a similar consistency. So the net effect is going to be the one color bleeding into the other. So I need, pushing on the point to get the again, here I go. I'm touching paint of a similar consistency into something that's already been painted, so it's going to disappear fairly completely. Might maintain a little bit of its some branch lines in there. I think it's going to take some yellow ochre to really... Now it's damp. I've got that surface very damp. So I'm going to have to wait on them, maybe play around down here a bit. Keep painting in a particular area, and what's going to happen is you will just make the area wetter and wetter, which changes the consistency of the paint. So let's go down here and create a very deep shadow over there, deep shadow over here. I think I want to make a little bit more variety in this transitional area, going from a yellower green to a bluer green. Breaking up the size of the foliage so that it's not the same size as the flowers. Maybe even tinting some of these, making them come forward a bit. They'll stay in their shadow area, but they'll stand out just a little bit. Okay, now back to the yellower versions. I need to create a little bit more of this small leaves breaking over the beach. Let's extend let's extend this out to here and disguise my birds. almost there. Hello, Alicia. I think I'm going to have to go with some almost straight purple. On these trunks. And in this deep shade part of the trees there. Now, I want to show a little bit of, ooh, do I want to have, yeah. I'm going to frame those little lavender blossoms, and I may put a few more in. I'm going to get a stiffish brush, sort of like this. It's nylon. Some cleanish water, and lift a little bit of that trunk to make it appear as though it appears in the and then around that I'm going to have to put some shade or some, frame that. In your regular shape. So most of my small white flowers from the China marker press, hey Cecile, hello, have disappeared. So I'm going to have to, I'm going to put a little more detail on the close ones, not back here. Let's detape and see what we're starting to get. And then I'll put the final marks of the flowers, because it's about the flowers. I don't want to get too busy with the foliage and make it that. Okay, that helps a little bit. So, oh, you're very welcome, Shelley. I think I'm going to get my pointy nylon brush, stiff. Yes, thank you for taking us there, Cecile. That was just such a wonderful place that I had no idea even existed. So first, some more of these lavender blossoms in shade. These are going to be more subtle. Perhaps I'll mix them with a little bit of white so that they're lighter. I stick right into the nozzle of the tube to do these. Make these a bit more irregular shapes. And let's have one out there. Now, rinse that. Very, very pointy, sticking right into the tube. Try to get back some of those very, very small white ones. And I'm thinking that probably would have been the best way to do this in the beginning anyway. So we could have, well, we can mix this with pink too. Where to do it? Over here. Let's get a bit of white out of the tube. Get some of this opera. And off we go. Different sizes, that's the thing that's going to help us. Now some of those roses up there look a little too large, so I'm going to get a green and cut them into smaller shapes so that they stay back there and these stay ahead. Okay. Now we can also make a very opaque green by using the cobalt turquoise, which is a dense pigment, and perhaps a little bit of this, and a little bit of the lavender. All of these very dense pigments, a lot of the lavender, to make a kind of a, well, let's get a cold, cold green. So I'm going to create a leaf shape. I know that's considered opaque, but the thing is, it is watercolor I'm using. It's not gouache, it's watercolor. So, maybe one or two more of those down here. And all I'm really doing is I'm just trying to activate an area. Okay. Noel! Noel lives very close to here. I'm going to put a little bit of this in there just to make that come forward. And then let's see what we get. Well, here we go. Hopefully that looks like Musée d'Art. Wonderful place. If you ever have the opportunity to visit, by all means go. Cindy, hello. So thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed that. Next week, I have no idea what I'm going to do next week, but I'll let you know on Monday. So thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, stay sane, and bye-bye.